Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. Live on the phone with me today, I have Sarah Archer in London, England. Sarah is a career coach and co-founder of Career Tree. She's an expert in career change coaching with a focus on helping clients find work they're passionate about and that makes them feel happy and fulfilled. She holds a Master of Science in Career Coaching with research on career confidence before career change. Sarah, thanks for joining me today.
It's a pleasure. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, well, I'm so excited to have you. We talked briefly before we got started, and I really think the areas that you focus on are going to be extremely helpful to listeners. So let's go ahead and get started.
Okay.
I mentioned in the opening that you have research in your master's degree about career confidence and career change, and I know you do it through positive psychology techniques. Can you share a little bit about that research and kind of what you did?
Yeah, I'd love to. The reason I chose career confidence before career change, and I'm sure you can identify with this, is a lot of my clients, when they're thinking about a major career change, often their confidence about making that change, their belief that they could do it, was actually quite low. So I wanted my research to really try and understand what that career confidence was and how we could actually increase it before career change. So I devised an action research program, which basically means I coached people using a program and then evaluated that research. So what I did is I found a definition of career confidence that had basically 4 elements to it. So the academic who came up with the definition, he believed that belief in your strengths, that you can do something, having hope, so having a goal and some pathways to that goal, having optimism and resilience were the kind of 4 elements that made up confidence. So what I wanted to test out was, could, using a positive psychology technique, if I devised a program that focused on those 4 elements, could we increase career confidence as a whole? So I worked with 5 clients, so it was quite a small sample group, but obviously it was quite an intense program, so I couldn't really enlarge the group. But actually, the combination of all those techniques had amazing results. So for one of the clients, for example, she was in a job that she really, really hated. She didn't enjoy it. She wanted to do something else, but just couldn't even believe that she could possibly change careers. She was just so ground down by her current job.
Yeah.
Following the program, she actually identified an opportunity that she wanted to explore more. She enrolled on a training course in the evenings. She identified she needed to change jobs in the same sector to earn more money to fund her career change. And about 2 months after the program, she found that job. And she's now kind of on a road to career change, where before the program, she couldn't even believe that she was possibly able to make that career change. So that was really nice to kind of get that particular result, but also for the other 4 coachees, they had similar increases in their career confidence and were kind of more positive about their career change possibilities.
Oh, that's interesting. You know, I feel like that's a really common thing that happens where when we start thinking of switching careers, we lose the confidence that we otherwise have. Do you have any sort of sense about why that happens? Like, why do we go through that process?
I think from the research, a lot of it is around fear. So it's fear of making the wrong decision, fear of not being able to do the new career, the new job, just fear of change generally. And it kind of then erodes your self-belief because you kind of let those fears grow and become bigger, and you then put obstacles in your way of making the change. So I think a lot of it is about that fear of a big change. Definitely.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like that must impact the person's search if they let that erode sort of their confidence.
Yeah, because I think, if you can't even contemplate that you can make that change, then, you just get overwhelmed by the potential choice, or you just see a blank piece of paper when you think about what that new career could be, and you can't get past that. Mm-hmm. A lot of the people I work with tend to come to me saying, I'm really stuck. All I can see is a blank piece of paper when I think about my future. I just don't know what I can do. So I think, fear can just, block us really, and stop us making progress in that career change journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you worked with these 5 people, what were sort of the techniques that you found? I mean, you mentioned some things like resilience that are important, but what are the techniques that you actually use with clients when you're trying to sort of increase this confidence level?
Yes, actually, I should have mentioned that. Because I wanted to use positive psychology techniques, and I don't know if you know that much about positive psychology or your listeners, but it's quite a new sort of branch of psychology. It's only been around probably the last 10, 15 years. And it's basically looking at how you can increase your positive approach to life, so your well-being and your happiness. So psychology in the past has tended to look at kind of what's gone wrong, what do we need to fix, but positive psychology is actually looking at people who are doing well and looking at how you can increase that. So the techniques that have been developed they're really simple to use, but they're really effective at actually helping you to feel more positive. And I think for any kind of change to take place, you have to feel positive about that change, because then that energizes you and makes you more resilient and optimistic. So, I can share one of the techniques, which is really simple, and a lot of the clients really liked it. And it's very kind of current because it ties into the kind of gratefulness agenda that's very now.
Oh, sure.
And it was developed by Martin Seligman, he's the kind of father of positive psychology. So it's based in research, and what they looked at was, it's called the 3 good things. So what they looked at was, if you can identify 3 things that have happened in your day that you feel grateful for, so it could be an event or an attribute that you've displayed, or a relationship, or maybe even just stopping to look at the sunset and making some time to look at the sunset, so taking kind of the moment. If you can identify 3 things a day, and with the research subjects that they used, they did it for a week, what they noticed was it increased their well-being for up to 6 months.
Wow.
You can make that a daily practice every day, for every week, for every month. It can just keep your levels of positivity much higher. And therefore, if you're embarking on change, you're going to feel more able to cope with change and all the challenges that that's going to bring.
Oh, that's so interesting. So do you recommend that your clients use like a journal, or where do they keep the list of 3 things?
Well, I think it depends on the client. So for some people, yes, a journal, they love it. I love journals. I always buy myself a nice, notebook. But for other people, recording it on your phone, just even there's kind of websites now where you can register, and they'll send you an email every day to say, what are you grateful for? And then they store whatever you send back to them for you then to access at any time, and it's all private. So I think it depends on what your preference is about how you like to kind of record these things. It's making it a habit. That's the big thing, is making it a habit and doing it regularly. But it definitely is worth it. That's
so interesting. Is there, and if there's not, it's okay, but is there a website that you've tried that you like for this technique?
There is. I'm trying to remember the name of it. I can't remember the name of the website where you can actually register. But if you Googled gratefulness, there's quite a few that will come up.
Yeah.
Actually look at it.
Yeah, that's such a good idea.
There's a UK site called Action for Happiness, and they have a lot of these positive psychology techniques on their website. I think they might have a link to a website you could use.
Oh, absolutely.
But I think, it's great. It's just finding what works for you, really. So, for me, I'd write it down, but I know lots of people, it would be easier to have it maybe on an app or, recording it on your phone.
Yeah, I'm definitely...
Good to record it, because then you can go back to it when you're having maybe a day when you're not feeling so positive. You can remind yourself of all the good things that have happened previously.
I totally agree. I'm the kind of person, too, I like to write things down, but sometimes having that technology is also kind of interesting. Well, you mentioned earlier that sometimes, when we sit down to think about, our new career, it's just like a blank page. It's hard to even think. And I know that one thing that you do is that you try to help your clients find careers that are helpful in terms of giving them meaning and enjoyment, if that they don't feel today. How do you help them figure out what that new career looks like and where they could get that meaning and enjoyment from?
Yeah, no, I'd love to tell you about that, because I think it's really hard for people to do it by themselves. I mean, you can try, but I think doing it with a coach or somebody to help you can just make you really understand what you need to have in place to have a career that's going to be enjoyable and meaningful. And I think so many people don't spend the time doing this reflection piece. They just kind of fall into a career, oh, I'm good at it, oh, I'll stay, and then they kind of get trapped because maybe they're good at it, but they don't actually enjoy it. It doesn't kind of fulfill them. So what I do is, because I think of it a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, in that we need to get all the pieces in place to be able to see the big picture. And what I mean by the pieces in place are looking at things like, what are your values, what's important to you, what motivates you and gets you out of bed in the morning to go to work. So really understanding those important core things that are core to you, really, those values and motivators. And then looking at things like occupational interests. So am I interested in practical and active things? Am I interested in research or scientific or caring, artistic, those kind of elements? Then also understanding your skills and which ones you're good at, but also ones that you enjoy using. Because often we're good at things, but we might actually enjoy using them very much. So it's really working out maybe your top 5 motivated skills. And the final piece of the jigsaw is really knowing when you thrive. So you know that feeling when psychologists call it when you're in flow, when you just don't know the time, you're absorbed, you just kind of spend a whole day doing something and you don't notice that, 7 hours have passed. So really understanding what the conditions are that you need to have in place to enable that. So it could be environmental conditions, it could be particular people that you work with, or how you're managed. So really knowing what you need to have in place to thrive. So when you've got all those pieces, you can then begin to think about, okay, well, if I have all of those things, I should be able to find something that's going to be meaningful to me. There might be a few compromises you might have to make, but I think it's really understanding what you bring to the world of work and what you need from the world of work to be able to then to identify something that's fulfilling that you can match against those things. So I think once you've got that picture, you're more able then to do the research about what the potential options could be to get away from that blank piece of paper when you're thinking about the future, and to kind of test out, well, is it going to give me my top value, which might be about achieving goals and objectives, or it might be about making a difference to people. Is it going to give me that? Is it going to give me my top 5 motivated skills? Is the environment going to be right? So really understanding how that job's going to work in relation to what they need from the world of work.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find with people that you talk to that sometimes their values change over time?
I think they can, yes. I mean, I think there are certain core values which kind of stay with you, but definitely I think things become important to you because of circumstances. I think particularly becoming a parent can change your work values, or other kind of big life changes can affect your values. I mean, it's interesting. I was doing an exercise last night with my coach supervisor and a peer coach where we were looking at our values that are important to us. And I noticed that some of mine had changed from being self-employed and running my own business. Some things were important to me now that perhaps weren't important to me 15, 20 years ago. So I think they can change, over time.
So what was one example of one that for you feel like has changed a little bit?
I think it was there were 2 really. One was about kind of engaging in new opportunities, because, I mean, like today, talking to you on a podcast, and I said to you, I've never done a podcast before, saying yes to things that are a bit, unusual, that you haven't done before. I really thrive on that, and I love having those opportunities to do new things. Whereas I think when I worked employed, I wasn't so driven by seeking those out. And I suppose the other one was financial security. So I think it changes for you when you're running your own business. It's a different kind of focus on financial security to when you were working for somebody and receiving a regular paycheck, if you like.
Oh, yes, I totally agree. I completely relate to that. I think another one that I've kind of seen for some of my clients that changes over time is money. Like sometimes maybe when you're younger, not for everyone, but for some people, there's a huge drive to make a lot of money. And if they are very successful in their career, there can sometimes come a point in their 40s, for example, where they may say, I made all this money, but I don't feel like it's meaningful to me, and I would like to look for something where I can find more happiness and maybe deprioritize the money a little bit.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, it's interesting you say that, because I just wrote a blog yesterday about defining your own version of success.
Oh, yes.
Because I think we're so kind of pushed into success equals how much you earn, what your job title is, how big your car is, and that's how we tend to think about success or celebrity success. And I think for a lot of people, they're wanting something different. They want to have something that actually is about what's right for them. So it could be, success might be about spending time with my children and doing something that's enjoyable at work, which might not mean about having a high-powered job. It might be about actually stepping off the career ladder for a while, and not being judged by other people. So I think if you can define your own version of success, it gives you the strength to actually be different from society's definition of success.
I totally agree. It's funny. I quit my corporate job almost 4 years ago, coming up, and I was like a vice president, and it was, great job, very stressful. And and when I quit, I remember I went the same day, I think, after my last day or whatever, I went to this bar in my neighborhood, and I was sitting at the bar by myself having a drink, and one of my friends was there that I wasn't anticipating. And I looked at him and I said, "Wow, you'll never believe this, but I quit my job." He was the first person that I told, and he looked at me and he gave me the reaction that I never expected. And he said, "How could you do that to me? I have been following your career for all these years. How could you quit your job? You're the person that I look up to." And it was the most terrible moment, because I had redefined my own values and what was more important to me. And I immediately got feedback that from someone else that they did not approve.
Yeah. But I think, and I'm sure your listeners will appreciate this, but actually it's being really courageous when you make that decision to either quit or to change your career. Because I think so many people stay in jobs that they're not happy with, that aren't right for them, because maybe the finances are, they're earning a good salary and they're worried about not earning such a good salary or what people might think, and they stay, doing a job that takes up a lot of your work, your life. I think, what the statistics, we spend a third of our life working, or 2/3 of our life working. If you want to do that, you want to be doing something that you really enjoy and that's going to give you pleasure. So I think, people who say, "I'm going to change and I'm going to do something different," are actually being really brave and courageous. And even though it's really scary and they might think, "Oh, what am I doing?" Having that courage to take control of the situation and say, "I want my life to be different." Really admire them.
I think you're right. And, you mentioned at the beginning that sometimes we get jobs kind of a little bit more passively, like someone approaches us, and we never take the time to think about what it is that we truly want and what's really important to us. And I think that's kind of this process that you're describing when you reflect with clients on their values and what's important to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting because my son has just turned 18, so he's thinking about university.
Oh, wow.
And, seeing him kind of think about his future, you realise actually how people just kind of fall into things, because you have to make choices at such an early age.
Yes.
About your future, in terms of what degree course you might do, and then from that, what career you might take. And I work with so many people who say, "Well, I kind of just thought it was the logical thing to do after my degree, or I got offered a job and I took it." And I think it is about then making a conscious choice later on that actually that wasn't right, and that I need to do a bit more thinking and reflection and putting the effort into my career.
No,
We're a bit like sleepwalking, aren't we? We just kind of go from one to the next, to the next.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think the thing that's especially challenging for people sometimes is, if you've done that forever and then you want to make a change, sometimes you don't have the skill set to proactively look for a job because it's a different process.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the job search process is changing all the time, particularly with technology and the way employers are recruiting. I mean, certainly here in the UK, there's lots more ways to find a job through social media, LinkedIn, Twitter even, different ways of employers reaching their potential employees is changing. You can't just think, I'll just look in the paper anymore, or speak to my neighbour who might know somebody. There's lots and lots of different ways to actually now access the job, which can be a bit overwhelming for people because they just get a bit paralysed on the internet with so much information and so many opportunities.
No, I totally agree. Well, so we were talking about, when you get to that place where you want to quit your job because you're trying to make a change, but sometimes what I've noticed is sometimes we put off quitting for so long, or we put off the change for so long that we get to the point that we are sick of our jobs and we're just ready to quit like tomorrow and never come back again. When you talk with a client that's to this point where they're just absolutely do not want to go in another day, I mean, how do you advise them when they've kind of hit that wall?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I mean, I have worked with clients who halfway through the program have said, right, I just quit yesterday, I'm leaving. I think for them it was the right decision. I think sometimes by engaging in a career coaching program or some kind of program of change, that sense that you're beginning to take control of your situation can be enough to enable you to kind of hang on in there because you know you're doing something about changing it. And I think in a way it's always better to stay if you can, because you can keep your career confidence high and you can make the decision about when you want to leave and what you want to leave that job for. Whereas I think if you're not working, there's a temptation to take the first thing you're offered because you're worried about the finances. Conversely, though, I think if you're in a job which is so stressful that it's affecting your ability to think about your future, because you're just so stressed out, you can't even think what the next step might be, then it could be the right decision to actually quit, because otherwise you might never make the change because of the stress that's involved in your current job. But I guess it would be having some kind of backup plan, either maybe a financial cushion, or to know that you could take on some interim or some freelance work to kind of tide you over so that you're not in a sort of desperate state where you just have to take anything. And that, I think, then is just jumping out the frying pan into the fire, really. So I guess I would counsel them to stay if they can. And sometimes we look at ways to make the job a bit better while they're in it, until they can get to the point where they can leave and move into something that's more satisfying.
Yeah, I was going
to say, can sometimes be a transition. Sometimes it's not about moving from where you are now straight into your career change. It could be about some kind of transition role to move you closer to it while you gain the right qualifications or experiences or skills.
No, totally. I really like your description of jumping from a frying pan into a fire. I do think if we quit before we have a new job, sometimes you're, like you said, it's like you remove some options, like you're forcing yourself into another potentially bad situation, and it can kind of start that cycle again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I mean, like you said, there are situations where it would make sense to quit. I've actually talked to people who had bosses who were yelling at them or throwing things, and if it's really impacting you emotionally or physically in some way, nothing is ever worth that, for sure.
No, and actually that can, erode your confidence. So then, I'm saying stay because it can keep your confidence high, but also if you've got a boss who is doing those kind of things, or belittling you or bullying you, that's going to make you feel you're not capable at your job, and that's going to impact your ability to then perform well at interview and get the next job. So I think it's a difficult decision. But I do know the clients that I've worked with where they have gone, I've just got to quit because I just cannot bear it any longer and it's impacting how I think about my future. They've not regretted it.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, once it's reached the place where, you can't enjoy your weekend, or you can't sleep, or you're not eating right, I mean, it's not a great place to be in terms of looking for another job.
No, absolutely. And unfortunately, there are still organisations where those kind of management practices, are allowed to take place, and that's the culture of the organisation. That's how people are managed and employed, and it's not great.
Mm-hmm. I would be really curious to know, and of course I don't know, but I would be curious to know if that's a more common thing in the U.S. than Europe or not. I feel like in the U.S. it seems like at least that we may have fewer protections as an employee. It feels like the company has more. I just feel like you just don't have as many rights as an employee as I think that may be the case in Europe, but I'm obviously not sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we do have good labour laws, but I do think there are bad managers everywhere, unfortunately. There are good managers too, but there are managers who are allowed to get away with that kind of behaviour, and then the organisation don't challenge it, and I think that's probably across, the US and Europe.
Yeah, true.
So I think it's important, when you're thinking about changing, that you do your research about the kind of organisation, its culture, and you talk to people who've worked there or are working there. So you do your research before you make the move.
I totally agree, because a bad boss can sort of make or break your whole experience, or a bad culture. Even if the company seems like a great company, if you get in there and you haven't done your homework on, is it really healthy, it could really be a bad situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some statistics which say 70% of people leave their managers, not their job.
Yes.
So that tells you quite a lot, really, doesn't it?
It's so interesting. Absolutely. Oh, yeah. I talk to people all the time who, if they had a better manager, they would stay at the company.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why I love working for myself.
Right. Exactly. Well, so one topic I know that you write about, and I've heard this topic a lot actually lately, is falling back in love with your current job. If we've fallen out of love with what it is that we're doing, what can we do to fix that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is something that is really good to consider, because a lot of people think if they're unhappy in their job, that everything's got to change. I've got to find a new career, I've got to leave this place. And actually, sometimes it can actually be about changing some elements of your job. So I think it's doing some reflection to really understand, what is it that's making me unhappy? Have I not got the opportunity to grow? Am I not being developed? Is it my manager? Is it the sector? And then I think working out if it's just one element that you could change, or if it is about a career change. But I think if you're working out actually it's an element that's wrong, then it's about either seeking to move to a different sector or organisation but staying in your profession, or about in your current organisation looking for different opportunities that are going to give you what you need. I've got an example of, I worked with a client who, she was a head of marketing, and she was working for a technology firm. It was quite an isolated role. She didn't have much interaction with colleagues, and she had a manager who micromanaged her, and she was convinced she had to change career because she was so unhappy. But actually, when we started to look at it, actually, the thing she loved about marketing was working on branding initiatives. And what she discovered is she didn't really enjoy technology, and it's very hard to market something that you don't really feel a passion for.
Yeah.
But what she did feel a passion for was the kind of museum and arts sector. So she was lucky to then make a move into a head of marketing role within a museum and arts organisation, and realised that she was really happy. And had she, gone down the route of changing career, she would have actually potentially have lost all the kind of what's the word, the build-up of that professional experience that she had in marketing that had left her, at a senior level, ready to move to the next level. So I think it's great that she realised actually it wasn't her career, her profession that was wrong. It was the organisation that was wrong, and the type of marketing that she was doing that was wrong.
Oh, that's awesome. That's such a good example. I think it's really important to be interested in what you're working on. I mean, it makes such a big difference.
It does. I mean, it's part of that, the occupational interest that I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
If you love artistic and creativity, but you're working in something that doesn't allow that to be engaged with, then it's very hard to feel enjoyment and passion for the job that you're doing.
No, absolutely. And I would guess that initially, she assumed, like you said, that it was marketing or that it was her.
Yeah, she did.
That's
even though she could
great.
see why she wasn't unhappy, she kind of thought, I need to change, it's all wrong, it's not working, which a lot of people get into. But I think it's always worth exploring, is there just one element that's making me unhappy, or do I need to think about career change?
No, that's fantastic. She's a great story, and I'm sure a very good advocate.
Yes, she is, yeah. She is, definitely.
Oh, that's such a good story. Well, I mentioned before we got started that I really want to pick your brain on a particular topic, and I know we may only go into it at a high level, but I still think it's kind of worth the discussion. As I mentioned before we got started, we have listeners who are both in the U.S. and Europe and actually in Asia and Australia, so that's really exciting. But a lot of the people that I talk with in the U.S. are, interestingly enough, really interested to move to another country or another, place. And in particular, they're especially interested in Europe. I mentioned to you, I went to a number of cities, and I always like to do networking while I'm there. But I was in Dublin a few years ago, and picking the brains of career coaches there, saying, what can we do as Americans to come and work in Europe? And I didn't get a lot of answers. So I keep getting this question. I think I just got it this week again. And I was wondering, I know you may not have all the answers, but do you have any thoughts on this topic?
I have some thoughts. I definitely don't have all the answers, because I think it is quite challenging, both for people in the US wanting to come to Europe, and also people in Europe wanting to go to the US because of the kind of restrictions around immigration. So I guess one of the possibly easiest routes is looking for maybe US companies that have locations overseas, and then working out whether you can, when you're working for that kind of company, how do they choose who they send overseas? Because I think it's easier if you've got a job within a company who then relocates you to a European city, because then they have to do all the visas and all the organisation, if you like. But again, it will depend on your profession and whether your profession is in demand in that particular country, I guess. So I guess if you're really passionate about it and you really want, that's the driver, is to work in London, it would be then thinking about, okay, what are the skills that I have that could be valuable, and maybe choosing a profession, if you're at that stage or you're thinking about career change, that is likely to be marketable overseas. And then doing the route that's actually finding a US company that would relocate overseas, or looking at companies that might recruit from the US. And I think particularly, as we said earlier, having a niche, so choosing something that maybe is in demand, that's not easily found, would be one route. Because obviously if you've got quite generic skills or experience, like marketing, as we were just talking about, often companies think, well, I can recruit a marketing person from the local community rather than have an expensive expat coming over and working here. So I guess they're my main thoughts.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I have a friend actually who he's a geographer, and he does research, and for many years he was researching the Arctic ice caps, the issues related to them unfreezing and how it was impacting migration of reindeer. Very specific, and
sure there was a program on it.
Yeah, so I met him here in Memphis, and he now lives in Norway. where he's able to use that skill, but it was so specific.
Yeah. I think that's definitely one route. I mean, actually, the other route which I've just thought of is studying in Europe. Because I think once you're here studying, it's then easier to look for opportunities. And obviously, if you found an opportunity and the company was willing to sponsor you, it would be definitely easier. So some people, I think, do use that route of studying.
Yeah,
a grad or an MBA or something in Europe, and there's some great, schools obviously to go to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. My little brother, as I mentioned, he went to graduate school in England, and he asked me at some point, do you think I should come back to the U.S. because he was getting family pressure to move back afterward. And I said, you should get a job while you're there and stay there as long as you want, because once you leave, it will be very hard to go back.
Isn't he lucky he's got a career coach?
I don't think he had considered how hard it is to go there because he was already there. And once you're back in the U.S., you're here,
Absolutely. Good advice.
So it's worked out. But anyway, I would love to share with listeners more about Career Tree. If we'd like to learn more about it, where should we go?
Yep, the website, so www.careertree.org.uk, has lots of resources, free resources that people can access. And I'm also currently developing an online career confidence course, so people can sign up on the waiting list. And I'm about to publish a book called Developing Your Inner Coach. So again, people can go to the website and sign up to find out when it's going to be published, hopefully in the autumn. So, yeah, I'd love them to check out the website and leave a comment on one of the blogs.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for joining me. This has been great. It's been really nice to meet you.
Yes, and you. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And thanks to those who sent me questions. You can send me your questions to Angela@CopelandCoaching.com. You can also send me questions via Twitter. I'm at Copeland Coach, and on Facebook, I'm Copeland Coaching. Don't forget to help me out. Subscribe on iTunes and leave me a review.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.